Hey, YouTube family, this is Professor Green coming with another segment of Color of Truth, where we're unveiling the real colors of all truth. This evening, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to kind of shift the paradigm of the thinking process and talk a little bit about not what's necessarily wrong with the world or wrong with you or me or whoever it may be, but what's right with you. So there's a great book called What's Right With You that I kind of dug out the crate that I want to share an excerpt of this with you tonight. And the basis of the book is Debunking Dysfunction and Changing Your Lives. It's by Barry Duncan. He's a clinical psychologist. Great book. You should get it and dig into it and conceptualize it. One of the things I want to talk about tonight is I want to encourage you because it seems like there's so much death, there's so much famine around us, and dealing with the coronavirus. A lot of people are very fearful. Um, so I kind of want to come to you tonight from a strength-based perspective, and hopefully it will uplift you and encourage you to know that there is hope, that life is worth living, that if I'm speaking to you, that you are a person of inherent worth. Um, God, the Creator, did not make junk, and that you are able to function in a society that seems or deems to be dysfunctional. All right. So, one of the outstanding things that I learned from this book, and you can see I had the pages underlined showing that I read. I don't know if you can see it or not, but some important key things I read in this book that I would like to share with you tonight, just for a brief moment. And I think that with all of the things that's going on in the world with our current administration, we need this hope. But most of all, I want to focus on pathology tonight. This evening, I want to talk about how a lot of times we buy into labels. You hear a lot of young people say, I'm cray cray, or I'm bipolar, or I'm schizo. Those are labels without a true DSM 5 diagnosis and the symptomology that goes behind it. You can't really diagnose yourself. Um, and so I want to talk about how we buy into labels and how we buy into dysfunction, and trying to hope that we stay clear from doing that and rely on our strengths to help us make it through any adversity we may have. All right. So this chapter is entitled Disease, Disorder, Dysfunctions, Deficits, and Disabilities, the Killer D's. All right. The Killer D's. All right. So, and not only that, a lot of times in our school systems, they're quick to diagnose children with ADHD and all these other type of attention deficit disorders. A lot of the children are bored. A lot of our children are gifted, but they're never tested for giftedness. They're always tested for some type of deficit. A lot of our children, the teachers can't hold their attention. They're extremely intelligent. But in this society, we never look at it from a strength-based perspective. So before you go and get your child checked out for hyper attention deficit disorder or attention hyperactivity deficit disorder, or get them checked out for schizoaffective or some type of disorder, engage your children. Learn them. Children emulate other children. Children are able to emulate their parents, so they may begin to show behaviors that they've only seen from us. So make sure that you don't label your child without understanding them and engaging them and modeling the right behaviors before them. So I want to share this with you. So I'm going to start in the middle of the page, page 12. The question, of course, is why. Some may blame the rising divorce rate, others decline of the traditional family. Some emphasize the stress and trauma associated with modern life. Still, others fault the lack of service for those at risk, talking about all these different dysfunctions, these different deficits, these different disorders. Who is responsible for them? Another possibility is simply the rising number of diagnosable conditions. Consider that the DSM 5 has itself experienced a dramatic growth inside over the last several decades. The sheer number of categories jumped from 66 in the first edition in 1952 to well over 300 in its current rendition. Apparently, we are sick and getting sicker by the minute. So a lot of people too, and another thing I would like to touch on is that a lot of people are so focused on coronavirus, we kind of tend to forget that there's other diseases, other health conditions that's out there that could cause underlying problems. And so the fear is so much of coronavirus that we forget about the other health conditions. And even our healthcare professionals and doctors, sometimes want to make sure that you don't have corona first before treating your other conditions. So we want to make sure we keep that in mind. But it seems like we're getting sick about a minute. Renowned psychiatrist Jerome Frank's ironic observation is being borne out. Psychotherapy may be the only treatment that creates the illness it treats. I'm going to say it again. Psychotherapy may be the only treatment that may create the illness it treats. Furthermore, this is what I want you to key in on right here. Furthermore, the number of mental health professionals has increased by an astounding 275%, according to this psychologist Duncan. 275% in the last 2 decades. Considering these two factors together, the rabbit-like proliferation of mental disorders and the exponential growth of therapists has led some to cynically argue that the DSM transforms ordinary reactions to life stresses into billable pathology to feed the voracious appetite of an ever increasing supply of mental health practitioners. I'll say that again. The DSM transforms ordinary reactions to life stresses into billable pathology. In truth, we have all been caught in the undertow of a growing industry. It is a crusade that is warping what we think about ourselves, our relationships, our parents, and our children. It is the D-industry. Those forces that seek to diagnose us with disorders, disease, deficits, dysfunction, and disability. The killer D's or otherwise diminish our innate propensities to help ourselves. So I just want to read a little bit of because that struck out to me when I read this book. That we oftentimes turn normal life stresses into pathologies. I remember I was working in a psychiatric hospital a while back, and there was a young man that came in, and they diagnosed him with a depressive disorder. And so me being an advocate for this individual, he suffered from selective mutism, which means that he he didn't want to speak or cooperate with anybody, or did not want to speak or cooperate with anybody. And it was of his own volition. And he, in turn, would not cooperate, so they wanted to um, chemically induce him in order to get him back to what they thought was a stable mind frame. And one of the things that I did was went out and began to talk to him and engage him. Well, to make a long story short, he disclosed to me that he lost his job after working 8 years, and he was the primary breadwinner of his family. Then, while searching for another job, his mother died. So he was the oldest sibling. And while his mother died, while they were preparing for the funeral, and because of the job loss in a rural community where there's not many jobs, guess what, y'all? His grandmother, the mother's mother, died, who was the matriarch of the family. And all he said around his brother was, I just feel like giving up. I feel like ending it all out of his life stresses. So the brother called a crisis hotline and had him admitted to the hospital for suicidal ideations. And I said it to say this, that after talking to him, he didn't need a lot of medication. He didn't need to have chemical restraints applied upon him. He just needed to be able to have a moment of catharsis, which is an emotional release. And he cried in front of me, and I allowed him that space to cry. So I just want to encourage you tonight is before you turn normal life stress to pathology, dig deep into yourself. Find that thing that you hold on to that's encouraging for you, that is joyful for you. Those things that have been obstacles in your way before that you overcame, and know that you are more than a conqueror. You are victorious. You are an overcomer. And I want you to do something, family. I want you to take, and if you have never done this before, find 5 to 10 strengths about yourself. And if you've never done it before, it's a quite challenging thing. 5 wonderful things you think about yourself, or 5 to 10 strengths that you have. And I want you to write those down. And I want you to capitalize off of those. And take those and make the best out of your life, because we all have inherent worth. We all have strengths. We're not defined by our deficits. We're not defined by the dysfunction that is evident in our society. And always remember, I tell a lot of people this when I meet them to give them some form of encouragement, that the airplane always takes off against the wind, not with it. Drop a comment, like, Color of Truth.